Hello folks, and welcome to GED Microlearning, a YouTube channel specialized in the GED math. Alright, so we're going to jump right in. So the first question is a place values question. So this is something that you might see in the basic arithmetic portion of the test. It says Liz paid $1,050 on rent, $27.80 on gas, and $49.99 on her phone. So what is her bill rounded to the nearest hundred? All right, so here basically what you need to know is these place values, okay? And what they're asking us is the hundred position. So this is actually pretty straightforward. So the hundred position is the third position to the left of your decimal point. So all you have to do is add up that bill for all the expenses, and you would look at that number, which is the third one, as we said, to the left of the decimal point, and you can see that the number immediately to the right is a 2, so you're going to round down, okay? So it will be 1,100. All right, so let's do a little bit more practice with this. So it gives us this massive number, and it asks us which decimal place does the number 2 represent, okay? So that's over there. So now we are actually, if we go back to our place values, this is the 10,000. Okay, so after the first sort of comma there, between the 7 and the 4, you enter the thousands, okay? And it's going to be 1,000, then 10,000, 100,000. It's always going to be like that. So that's option C. Okay, so this next problem looks at distance, all right? So it says Rick drove 258 miles at 5 hours. At what rate did he travel rounded to the nearest one? All right, so in order to do this, this is a really good equation to memorize because it's just going to save you a lot of time. So distance is equal to the rate times time. So if we now use this formula, all you have to do is plug in the values, right? So they told us that Rick drove a distance of 258, and they told us that he drove for 5 hours. And all we have to find is the rate. So what you do here is the same way that you do, excuse me, with an algebra problem, which is divide both sides by 5. And that gives you 51.6. Remember that in the question they asked you to round to the nearest one. So the nearest one would be the first position to the left of the decimal point. Because your answer is 51.6, that means that you're going to round up. Okay, so the correct answer would be 52. Okay, next question. We're going to practice this again. So Luke drove 865 miles from Atlanta to New York at a rate of 55 miles per hour. How many hours did it take? So again, we're going to use this formula that we already used, but in this case, instead of asking us for the rate, they're asking us for the time. But essentially, it's going to be the same scenario. Okay, so if you plug in those values like that, then you would divide both sides by 55, and that gives you the time, which is 15.7 hours. All right, one more question on this. So it says Richard drove a total of 757 miles. He drove 4.5 hours today, 8.5 hours yesterday. Assuming he was driving at the same speed both days, what was his rate? And again, same question, okay? So what you would do is, first of all, you're going to add up the total number of driving that he did. So 4.5 plus 8.5, which is 13. 13 hours, and then you would set up your equation like that, and then divide both sides by 13, and that gives you 58.2 miles per hour, which is your rate. Answer B. All right, so the next question, question 6, is a question that looks at cost. And this is another formula that is really helpful to know, and which you already know when you go shopping, but good to have in your memory. Okay, so it says Maria paid $22.75 for several slices of banana bread, costing $3.25. How many slices did they get? All right, so essentially that's the formula for cost. So you would multiply however many units you got of something multiplied by the price, and that gives you the cost. So let's say you buy 3 pens, and they cost $20 each. you would say that the cost of the 3 pens is $60. Okay, so we would do the same thing here, because in this case they're asking us for the number of slices, so the number of units. So you would plug in your equation like this, and then to solve for units, you divide both sides by 3.5. Okay, so if you divide by 3.5 on the right, that gives you 0, and then on the left side, it's going to give you 7. And this is answer B. All right, so let's do one more question on this so that you kind of consolidate that. So in this case, it says Joe pays $650 for 13 pairs of sneakers costing the same amount. How much does one pair of sneakers cost? Okay, so again, we use this formula that we already discussed previously, and then what you would do is plug your numbers in like this. So in order to isolate the price on the right side, you divide by 13, and on both sides like this, and that gives you that each sneaker is cost $50. Okay, and then of course, just to double check your work, if you multiply $15 by 13 pairs of sneakers, that would give you 650. All right, another type of question that you might see, that you will see in the GED, relates to decimals and being able to see which decimals are larger than others. Okay, so in this case, it asks you to arrange weights from greatest to smallest. So what you have to remember with decimals is, first thing is to look at the number to the left of the decimal point, and that's going to tell you which of those two numbers is larger. So in this case, it's the one on the left. And then the second thing that you're going to do is you're going to look at the number on the right of the decimal point. Okay? So in this case, again, the item that is larger is, in this case, the one on the left as well. All right, and this is important when you have two numbers where the number to the left of the decimal point is the same. So in this case, both of them are 0 point something. Okay, and this would allow you to differentiate which one is larger or smaller. All right, so your correct answer would be D. Okay, so it says Jimmy gets paid overtime when he works more than 40 hours in 1 week. How many hours of overtime did he work? And that's the, sorry, I should have provided that earlier. That's the overtime that he has worked every day of that week. And all you have to do here is to add up all of these decimals. So here there's no kind of mystery if you're doing it on your calculator. You just have to remember that when you have, for example, 5, a whole number, it's actually 5.0. Okay, so if you were not allowed to use your calculator for this problem, that's the only thing you have to remember. Okay, so if you just add, this is a pretty straightforward problem. If you just add these numbers up, then the answer that you get is 34.19. All right, question 10. So 1 container of cleaner holds 3.27 liters of product. If Jan bought 6 containers, how many liters of cleaner did she buy? All right, so here we know that 1 container holds 3.24 liters. So if we multiply that by 6 containers, then that gives us the total amount of liters that she bought, which is 19.44, option D. Okay, so the next question looks at percentages and fractions of people. It says 19 out of 25 people surveyed said they went to the movies at least once in the past month. What fraction of people surveyed did not go to the movies? All right, so the first thing you want to do here is you want to find out how many people did not go to the movies. So you would subtract 25 minus 19, which is the number of people that went to the movies, and that gives you 6. Okay, so 6 people out of the total didn't go. And then step 2 is the fraction of people. So we have that there was a total of 25 people and 6 of them didn't go. Okay, so that would be the fraction 6 over 25. And that is option D. Okay, the next question looks at two things. So one, it requires you to be able to change mixed numbers to improper fractions, and it also looks at adding fractions that have a different denominator, as you can see. So it says salad dressing requires 1 3/5 cup of olive oil, 1/3 cup of lime, and 2/5 cup of water. So how many cups of salad dressing will the recipe produce? Okay, so the first thing that you want to do here, as we said, you have different numbers. So you have mixed numbers and you have fractions. So what you want to do is first change those mixed numbers that you have there into improper fractions. Okay, so let's just quickly remind ourselves of what a mixed number is. So essentially, it's a number that looks like this, where you have a whole number and then you have a fraction. And remember, fractions consist of two parts. The top part is the numerator, the bottom part is the denominator. Okay, so in order to change a mixed number to an improper fraction, I like to use this method called the MAD method, okay, where the M stands for multiplication. So here you're going to multiply your whole number, which in this case is 5, by the denominator, which was the bottom number of the fraction, so that gives you 20. Okay, so that's the M in MAD. Okay, so that part. Then the next part that you're going to do is you're going to do the A, which means add. So to the number that you just got, you're going to add the numerator. All right, so we, in the previous step, we got 20. So now we're going to add 3. Okay, so our answer is 23. And this is going to be our new numerator. And then finally, the denominator, this one's easy. Your new denominator is basically going to be the same as the old denominator. So in this case, it's 4. All right, so your new, so this mixed number, 5 3/4, if you change it to an improper fraction, is 23 over 4. All right, so let's apply the MAD method to this number. Okay, so first of all, the M is multiplication, so we multiply 1 times 5, that gives us 5. Now we're going to add the numerator, which was 3. So we get 5 plus 3, that's 8. And remember that the denominator stays the same. So we end up with 1 3/5 is the same as 5 plus, 8 over 5. Okay, so that was step 1. Now step 2 is to add all your fractions together. And remember, when we add fractions, they all have to have the same denominator, which is the number in the bottom. So first of all, let's add these two together because they already have the same denominator. So if you add fractions across, if they have the same denominator, the same number at the bottom, all you have to add is the numbers in the top. Okay, so we would have 8 plus 2, which is 10, divided by 5, and that gives us 2. And now all we have to do is add that remaining fraction. Okay, so that tells us that in total, the salad dressing produced 2 cups and 1/3. Okay, we had 2 1/3 cup of salad dressing. Option D. Okay, question 13. So let's practice this once again. So it says James is making shirts. He bought 7 1/3 yards of cloth. The material was cut from a bolt fabric containing 25 1/6 of cloth. How many how many yards are left on the bolt? Okay, so the first thing, once again, you can see that these mixed numbers have different fractions with different denominators. So we want to change those mixed numbers to improper fractions. So we start with the first one, so 7 1/3, so multiply 7 times 3, that gives us 21. The A for adding, 21 plus 1 is 22, and the denominator we say stays the same. So 7 1/3 is actually 22 over 3. All right, we're going to do the same thing for the second number. So if you multiply 25 times 6, that gives you 150. Add the numerator, which is 1, that gives you 151. Denominator stays the same. So this is 151 over 6. All right, so that was step 1. Step 2 is now we're going to add these improper fractions together. However, remember that there's a rule that in order to add or subtract fractions, they have to have the same denominator, meaning that the number at the bottom has to be the same. So we have to find a common denominator. So what number do these two numbers in the bottom divide by? Okay, so the common denominator here would be 6. So what we have to do is take the second fraction, 22 over 3, and multiply it by 2 over 2. That's going to give us 44 on the top, okay, 22 times 2, and in the bottom it's going to give us 6. So now we can go ahead and do step 3. So the question asks how many yards are left on the bolt. Okay, so all you have to do now is subtract that, and I think I had I had an added addition sign in the previous slide. Sorry about that. So what you have to do is subtract this amount that he bought, the 7 1/3 yards, or 44 over 6, from the original bolt. And once again, as you can see, the denominator is the same, it's 6, so all you have to do is subtract the numbers in the top. So 151 minus 44 is 107 over 6. And the next thing would be to now turn that improper fraction into a mixed number. So here you want to ask yourself, how many 6's are there in 107? Okay, so if you divide 107 by 6, let me just do it on my calculator, that gives you 17.83. Okay, so we know that there's 17 6's in 17. So if we multiply 6 times 17, that gives us 102. And then this is the number that is going to be useful to find the remainder. Okay, so we have the remainder is calculated by taking that original number, 107, minus that number that you just got, 102. That gives you 5. And then you're going to keep the original denominator, which was the 6. Okay, so this number that you just got, 17 and 5/6, is equal to 107 over 6. All right, so let's just double check with our MAD method. Okay, so once again, let's multiply 17 times 6. That gives us 102. We're going to add the numerator, which was 5. That gives us 107. The denominator stays the same, which was 6. So there you have it. 17 and 5/6 is equal to that improper fraction that we had achieved before, 107 over 6. So our correct answer is C. All right, so question 14 is also going to explore fractions. So here it says, a city is considering taxing companies that generate carbon emissions. If 360 people were surveyed, how many are in favor of this measure? All right, so the first thing that you want to do is you want to look at the table and only pay attention to what they're asking you, which is the people that are for this measure, okay, which is 5 over 12 of the people who were surveyed. And all you have to do now is multiply that fraction by the total number of people. Okay, so you would multiply 360 times 5 over 12. That gives you that number, and then the final answer is 150. Option C. Okay, question 15 looks at proportions. So it says a map scale says that 3 inches is equal to 145 miles. What actual distance would a map distance of 9 inches represent? Okay, so this is a proportion problem, as I said. So just a quick recap. A proportion is basically a relationship between two values. So if I told you, for example, 1/4 is equal to 25 cents, that's a proportion. And you would set it up as you see below, right? So 1/4 divided by 25 cents. And if I asked you, how much is 7/4 in cents? You would set up a proportion like this. And what you would do is multiply across and solve for x. Okay, so if we go back to our problem, here the proportion is inches and miles, right? So they're telling us that 3 inches is going to be 145 miles. And they're asking us how much would 9 inches be in miles. So all you have to do is set up your proportion like this, and then once again, you're going to solve for x. So you're going to multiply across like this, and that gives you 3x is equal to 1,305. And now in order to solve for x, you would divide the left side by 3. And remember that what you do on the left, you have to do on the right. And that would give you 435 miles. Okay, another way to check it in this case would be easy is because it's 3 times as much. If you multiply, they're telling us that it's 145 miles is equal to 3 inches. So 9 inches would be 3 times that amount. Okay, so that's another option, right? You could just multiply by 3. But this is the way that you would set up a proportion. Okay, so the correct answer is C. Okay, so the next one is another proportion problem. So it says the Medford Pirates won 5 out of 9 games. At the same rate, how many games will they have to win to win 50 games? Okay, so our proportion would be this, wins to total number of games. So they've told us that they won 5 out of 9, and they're asking us how many games do they need to play in order to win 50 games. Okay, so you would put 50 on the top there in the right, and your x is the number of total number of games that they would have to play. So once again, you're going to multiply across like this, so 5 times x, and then 9 times 50. That should give you 5x is equal to 450. Then in order to solve for x, you're going to divide both sides by 5. That gives you 90. Okay, so they have to play 90 games in order to win at the same rate. Okay, and this is again easy because if you just multiply the 5 times 10 initially and the 9 times 10, it would give you 90. Okay, but I just want to show you the correct way to do this. Okay, so the next problem involves you being able to read data from a circle or a pie graph. All right, so the question reads, a city established a budget to improve the subway system. If $84,000 is allocated for maintenance, what is the total budget for the project rounded to the nearest one? All right, so first of all, let's just remind ourselves really quickly how to read a pie graph. So usually you have at the top, you have a title, which is telling you what this information is about. And then you usually have a legend to the side, which is telling you which color, what each of these slices represent, okay? So if we go back to our question, it's asking us maintenance of subway stations, which is the blue slice, which is 36% of the total budget. All right, so what you would do is you would set up a proportion like this, and they're telling us that that $84,000 are allocated for maintenance of the subway station. Okay, so that would be the part. If we look at the graph, as we said, that is 36% of the total budget, which is there in blue. So you would plug that number in, as you can see on screen, and all you have to do now is solve for x. So once again, multiply across both sides like this. You should end up with this number, and then if you divide it, you end up with this really big number, $233,333. Okay, so that would be option C. All right, so the next question deals with percentages. So it says there are 320 students in a class. If 25% are absent on any particular day, find the number of students present in class. All right, so just remind yourself that if you change a percentage to a decimal, you have to divide that number by 100. So 25% divided by 100 would give you 0.25. So the step one is you're going to find out how many students are absent by multiplying the total number of students by that 0.25. Excuse me, that gives you that 80 students were absent. And the step two would be to figure out how many students were present. So all you have to do is subtract that number that you just found from the total number of students. That gives you 240, which is option B. All right, so it says 32% of the 7,501 voters registered in the election chose to increase the funding to the parks in their community. How many people, rounded to the nearest one, voted for this measure? All right, so something that I always like to do is kind of find like a ballpark number, okay? So that gives you an idea of you know, what sort of number you're looking for your answer. So 32% of anything, okay, that's like a third, right? So if you take that number of voters and divide it by 3, it's going to give you around 2,500, okay? So your answer is more or less going to be around that number. All right, so how do you set up this equation? Well, exactly the same as we did before. So you would set up your proportion equation like this. And they're asking us specifically how many of these people chose to increase funding to the park. Okay, so that is how you would set up your equation. So the total number of voters, or the whole, is 7,501. You put the percentage there, 32, and then you multiply across like this. You should end up with this number. Then in order to solve for x, you're going to divide both sides by 100. And that gives you 2,400. Okay, and remember that our ballpark figure was 2,500. Okay, so pretty close by. All right, the next two questions, I think, are statistics. So they're asking you, what was the mean asking price for homes in Medford? Okay, so there's a few things that you have to remember for the statistics portion that they always ask. Their mean, median, and mode, and range. Okay, so mean is the arithmetic mean, or the average. So in order to get the average, basically you would, this is incorrect, I'm sorry, it should be the number, the total that you got divided by the total number of items. Okay, so what you would do here is you would add up all of the prices of the houses, which is that number that you could see in the bottom right, and then you would divide by the total number of homes, okay, which is 5 homes, like that. So the mean price is $1,223,818, okay, option A. So the next question is the same question, except that here they're asking for the median asking price. And median simply means the middle value. So you don't have to do any math here. All you have to do is take these numbers, these prices, and put them in order from the lowest to the highest, and then choose the number in the middle. That's going to be the median. So in this case, it's 120,000, which is option A. All right, so the next question looks at frequency tables. So it tells you which visit has the highest frequency in the data. And they're giving you a number line with some plots, and they're also giving you a table. So this is pretty straightforward, right? If you look at the table there, the number of students that had most weekly visits is 3. And if you look at the number line, number 3 is also the one with the highest frequency in the data. Okay, so just the highest number of students in this case, which is option B. All right, so question 25 looks at absolute numbers. And they give you this equation. All right, so the first thing that you have to remember when you see an absolute value, which is those vertical bars that you're seeing there, is this. So that whenever you see a number that is surrounded by those vertical bars, remember that the number inside is never going to be negative. Okay, it's always going to be positive. So whether you have 3, that's going to be positive, or you have negative 3, the absolute value of that negative number is going to be positive. Okay, so now all you have to do is solve the equation. So there it is. Minus 20 divided by 5 would be minus 4. But remember, we have those vertical lines, which are absolute values. So the absolute value of minus 4 is 4. And then all you have to do is add that minus 12. That gives you minus 8. Option A. All right, question 24 is going to just quickly review cost, which we already covered quite a bit, just to see if you're on the ball. So it says a company sold a total of $530 in gift boxes. If the gift boxes cost $5 a piece, how many boxes did they sell? So that's the formula there for cost. All right, and what we know is the cost, which was $530, and we know the price per unit, which was $5. So all we have to do is divide the left side by 5 and then the right side by 5. That gives us 106 units. All right, folks, so we're about midway through the quiz, so just a quick plug for the program. If you're finding any benefit, really appreciate it if you could share on your social media if you think somebody might benefit. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so we have another question on cost. So it says if 4 tires cost $360, how much does a single tire cost? Again, this formula that we just kind of hammered would give you 90 per unit. Okay, so that's answer D. All right, so now we're moving on to order of operations. Okay, so let's say they ask you to solve this expression. So what this expression requires you to know is a concept in math called order of operations. So in math, we always do things in a certain order. The same way that, when you put your clothes on in the morning, you might put on your underwear, then your pants, and then your shoes. In math, we also do things in a specific order. So we always solve things from left to right, and then we always follow PEMDAS. Okay, so PEMDAS is an acronym that tells you the order in which you have to solve things. Okay, so whenever you have a mathematical equation, if there's a parentheses, that's the first thing that you do. Then you work on the exponents, multiplication and division, then addition, subtraction. And the other thing you have to remember is that multiplication and division are interchangeable. So you can either multiply first and then divide, or you can divide and then multiply. Similarly with addition and subtraction. Okay, so I've left that cheat sheet there on the top right, the PEMDAS. So remember in this expression, the first thing that we're going to do is the parentheses. So that's all that area that is in pink there on the top line. And then within the parentheses, we have another 2 sets of parentheses. So that's the first thing that we're going to solve. Okay, so we're going to solve 3 squared and then 5 minus 1. So that gives us this answer. Okay, next part we said multiplication or division. So first of all, if we divide 9 by 3, that gives us 3. So we end up with this. And then if we multiply, again, that's 7 by 3, that gives us 21 plus 12. Okay, so notice we're only working on the stuff inside the brackets, inside those parentheses. All right, so then the next step we said was adding or subtracting. So we are going to add that 21 plus 12. That gives us 33. All right, so now that we've finished everything that was inside those brackets, including the parentheses inside, now we can go to the outside. All right, so 4 plus 3 is 7. And then you simply multiply 7 plus times 33. That gives you 231. All right, so question 27 looks at functions. Okay, so it gives you a function, which is y is equal to 2 multiplied by x minus 5 plus 4, and it asks you to solve for f of x. Okay, so step 1 here is, first of all, to simplify the equation using the distributive property. All right, so what that means is that you're going to multiply that 2 outside of the parentheses by everything that's inside the parentheses. Okay, so multiply 2 times x and multiply 2 times minus 5. That gives you 2x minus 10 plus 4. All right, and the next step, just clean that equation up, so you end up with 2x minus 6. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is now to actually solve this problem. So before we do that, let's just remind ourselves of what functions are. So imagine that they give you this expression y is equal to 3 minus 2x, and they give you this table. So what this table is telling you is that for whatever value of x you introduce into that formula there on the left, you're going to get a specific value for y. Okay, so if we introduce 0 as our x value in this equation, we should end up with a value of 3 for y. Okay, so let's try it out. So where we have the x, we're going to put a 0. And now you can see that 2 times 0 is 0. So we end up with y is equal to 3. Okay, and that's all there is to it. So now we can go ahead and solve for f of x. And they're giving us the value of 5. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to plug that 5 into our equation that we got in the first step, like this. And then we end up with 10 minus 6, which is equal to 4. Okay, so the correct answer is C. Question 28 looks at ordered pairs. So it says, the ordered pair minus 5, comma, minus 1 is a solution to which of the following equations? So just a quick recap, whenever you get two numbers like that in a parentheses, these are known as ordered pairs, and really what they are coordinates. Okay, so the first value, they're ordered alphabetically. Okay, so the first number is going to be an x value, the second number is going to be your y coordinate. Okay, so now if we go back to our question, we know that our x is minus 5 and our y value is minus 1, and all we have to do is plug those numbers into that equation there on the left. Okay, so we can now go ahead and multiply these numbers. So 8 times minus 5 is going to be minus 40, plus minus 2, that would give us minus 42. Okay, so that is option 1A. Okay, and basically you would do the same exact thing for every single one of these equations there. So it's a little bit tedious because you have to go through each of them, but you basically do the same thing every time. So just include those values where the x or the y are. All right, so we continue with these questions that look at like y-intercept and stuff. So it says, where does the line with the equation x and y is equal to minus 2 intersect with the line with the equation 5y is equal to 4x minus 2? All right, so again, just remember the ordered pairs that we just discussed. So in this case, what you would do is you would take that y value there in pink, and you would plug it into your equation. And what you're going to do is you're going to solve for x. Okay, so you multiply that out. You end up with minus 10 is equal to 4x minus 2. Add 2 on both sides. You end up with this. To isolate the x, you divide both sides by 4, and that gives you minus 2. And now, those are your ordered pairs, right? X is minus 2, and we know from the question that y is also minus 2. Okay, so there you go. Your answer is D. All right, question 30 looks at inequalities. So it says, which value for x makes the inequality of x minus equal to 1 true? All right, so let's remind ourselves of what what exponents are. Okay, so whenever you have a number raised to another number, as you can see that there, that's an exponent. And the exponents have two parts, so they have a base and then they have the exponent. This is telling you how many times you multiply the base number by itself. So let's say that you had 2 raised to the second power. So that's telling you you're going to multiply number 2 by itself twice. Okay, that would give you 4. Let's say you have 5 raised to the third power. Same thing, you multiply 5 by itself 3 times. Okay, that gives you 125. All right, so if we go and do this, and you do that for every single number, you'll notice that none of these are less than or equal to 1. And C, and I didn't put the answer here, sorry about that. is 20 raised to the 0 power. So what you have to remember here, and this is just a rule that you have to remember, is that when you have any base, any number raised to the 0 power, that equals 1. So whether it's 1 raised to the 0, that's going to equal 1. 500 raised to 0 also equals 1. Okay, so the correct answer would be 20 raised to the 0 power, okay, because it's equal to 1. All right, next question is another inequality. So they ask you to solve for this. And this is just like a normal algebra problem, except that you don't have an equal sign, you have a more greater than sign. So you would take that problem, and on the left side, you're going to add 5. And you're going to do the same thing on the right side. So those 5s cancel out on the left side. You're left with minus 3x is greater than 15. And now what you would do is divide both sides by minus 3 to get the x, and that would be your answer. However, here's another thing that you have to remember. Whenever you divide by a negative number in an inequality like this, the sign is going to change direction. Okay, so instead of having x is greater than minus 5, the correct answer is 5 is less than minus 5. Okay, so that's just something that you have to remember because it's a little bit of a trick. Okay, the next few questions we're going to look at graphs. So in this first instance, we're looking at histograms. So this question is asking you how many trees were, sorry, there was a typo there, were less than 75 feet high. Okay, so remember that histograms are kind of like bar graphs where all the bars are just squished together, okay? And remember, the first thing that you do is obviously if there's a title, you would look at the title. Then you look at the y-axis, which in this case is frequency of rain or something like that. Then you look at the x-axis, which in this case looks at months. And if you wanted to find out what each of these bars represent, like in September, you would follow that bar to the top and then to the left. That tells you that in September there was, I don't know, rain 18 days, okay? So that's how you figure out the number associated to each of these bars. All right, so if we go back to our histogram, it's telling us trees less than 75 feet high, okay? So you can basically ignore that part of the graph because you only want these 3 bars. So you do, as we said, you're going to follow that orange bar to the top and then to the left. That gives you 8. If you do that for the blue one, 3, and for the red one, 3, you add these 3 numbers together, it gives you 14. All right, so the next question is a little bit more complex because there's 2 parts of it. So it says, what is the percentage of people who had a height of less than 179.5 but more than 159.5? All right, so if we look at the graph again, we're only going to be focused on these folks, okay? So these 2 bars. And in the yellow bar, we have 7 people, and in the green bar, we have 5 people. Okay, the second step is to find, so that's 12. Okay, the second step is to find the percentage. So they're telling you in the title that this is this histogram represents 30 people. Okay, so the total number, the total is 30, and you just found out the height for 12 of them. So you would set up your percentage like that. Okay, so 12 over 30, which is equal to 0.4. And in order to find the percentage, you would multiply that 0.4 by 100. That gives you 40%, which is option A. Okay, the next question is also graphs, but here we're looking at line graphs. So in this question, it asks you, in which month did the company make approximately $10,000 in product sales? All right, and just to recap, as always, you're going to read the title, then you're going to look at the x-axis. In this case, it's tickets per day. Then you're going to look at the x-axis, which is there, which looks at months. So if we look back at our graph, if you look at the y-axis, the y-axis is the sales in thousands. Okay, so they're asking you what happens, which month the company makes approximately 10,000. So if you go to the 10 mark and you follow that into the graph, you can see that this happened in March. Okay, so the correct answer is B. All right, the next question is also a line graph, but this one's pretty much more complex, okay, because you can see that there's a ton of craziness going on here. So it asks you what day in October that the startup and free demo videos perform similarly. All right, so in this case, this is, I said, more complex, but once again, you would follow the same procedure. You look at the title. You look at that little box on the right side, which is your legend. This is telling you what each of these lines represent. Then you look at your x-axis and your y-axis. Okay, so if we go back to the question, it's asking us about startup and free videos. Okay, so if we look at the legend, it's only asking us for to look at the red and blue line. And then it's asking us what day in October did they perform similarly. So essentially you have to look at where they intersect, which is right there. Okay, so that's where they're almost identical, which is October 8th. Okay, question 36 is going to deal with percent proportions. Okay, so it says Pat called 140 customers to offer them an upgrade on their internet plan. Of those he called, 84 purchased the upgrade. What percent agreed to upgrade? Okay, so in these sort of questions, you want to use this percent proportion formula that we've discussed in previous questions today. All right, where the part divided by the whole is equal to the percent divided by 100. So if we go ahead and plug our numbers into here, what they're asking us is the percent, which would be the x. So you go ahead and multiply across, as we've done before. You should end up with this. In order to isolate that x, divide both sides by 140. So x is equal to 60. Excuse me, 60%, which is option C. All right, question 37 looks at polynomials. Okay, so it says, asks you to solve this thing. So the first thing that you have to do here is the distributive property. Okay, so that means that you're going to multiply that negative sign, but by what's inside the parentheses. So you would multiply negative multiplied by negative a, that gives you positive a, and negative sign multiplied by 5, that gives you negative 5. And then the next step would be simply to clean this up. All right, so you have 2a plus a, that's 3a. And then if you look at the whole numbers, you have 3 plus negative 5, which would be negative 2. Okay, so you end up with 3a plus negative 2, or you could just simply represent it as 3a minus 2. All right, so we're going to do another one. This one's a little bit more complex. All right, so first of all, as we said, use the distributive property. You're going to take that negative sign and multiply it by each of the components inside the bracket. That would end up with this. Okay, so a negative sign by a positive 3x is minus 3x, and negative times negative 3x is positive, and then if you multiply a negative sign by a negative 2, that gives you a positive 2. All right, so that's step 1. Now you're going to clean up your equation doing the following, combining like terms. And by like terms, I mean we're going to combine numbers that have the same sort of exponents. Okay, so first of all, we're going to combine all the terms that are raised to the second power. Okay, so x raised to the second power. So 5x squared minus 3x squared would give us 2x squared. All right, next term that we're going to combine are all those numbers that have an x next to them. So that's minus 2x plus 3x, which would give you x. And then the final thing that you do is that you're going to combine the whole numbers in the equation. So in this case, you would have 1 plus 2, that gives you 3. And then finally, what you're going to do is you're going to take all of these numbers and make up a new equation. Okay, so your new equation would be 2x squared plus x plus 3. All right, so Lou has 33 AB squared board games and John has 7 A squared B games. Which of the following expression represents the product of the number of board games that they have? All right, so remember that the word product is kind of a lingo or a keyword that tells you multiplication, okay? So you want to multiply the number of board games that Lou has by the number of board games that John has. So the first thing that you would do is multiply the coefficients. So the coefficients are the numbers in front of the letters. So 3 times 7 is 21. Then you're going to multiply all the terms that contain an A. So A multiplied by A squared gives you A to the third. And then you're going to multiply all the terms with a B. Okay, so you would multiply B squared times B is equal to B to the third. All right, so just a quick recap of multiplying exponents. So when you multiply an exponent, if they have the same base, as you can see here, all you have to do is add the exponents across. Okay, so in this case, so, you know, if you had 2x raised to the third multiplied by 3x raised to the fifth, you're going to add those numbers in the top across. All right, and that's how we get answer B. All right, so the next question is looks a little bit messy, but it's actually pretty easy. So it asks you to solve this big mess there in the top, and what you have to remember when you look at something like this is that the bottom number, the denominator, is dividing by both of the expressions in the top, meaning that if we were to rewrite this equation, we would have to rewrite it like this. Okay, this is what the top expression represents. It's the same thing. And now you can see how easy it is for us to solve this, because on the left side we could go and get rid of these, and then on the right side we can get rid of that. So we end up with x minus 3. All right, so it looks a little bit intimidating at the beginning, but then if you kind of break it up into smaller pieces, you can see it's pretty doable. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do a few geometry questions. So the first thing would be looking at triangles. So this question asks you to find the area of a figure. So remember that in the geometry portion, you are not required to remember the formulas. Those will be provided for you, but I would definitely look at them and make sure that you know how to use them. Okay, so if you look at the formula of a triangle, it's this, 1/2 the base times the height. So this is pretty straightforward. We know the base is 14 and the height is 5. You would just multiply these numbers, put those numbers in your equation, and 70 times 1/2 is 35. Okay, for question 42, we're going to use the same figure, but here the question asks you to look at the perimeter. So remember that the perimeter is the distance around a figure. So if we looked at the perimeter of the square, basically this and this plus this is the perimeter. So that's all you have to do for this question. You basically have to add those 3 sides together to get the perimeter. All right, so that would be 32.2, which is option D. Okay, question 43, a little bit more tricky, right? So they give you a rectangle and only part of the rectangle is shaded. So here you would look at the, what they're asking you really is to find the area of a trapezoid, okay? And this is the formula. So once again, all you have to do here is introduce those numbers into your formula, and that gives you 45.5. All right, the next question is also geometry, but this is more of a word problem. So it says Lyle wants to fill a vase shaped like a cylinder with water. If it's 25 centimeters tall and has the radius of 6 centimeters, what is the volume? So if you look at your formula for volume of a cylinder, that's what it is. It's pi, which is 3.14, times the radius squared times height. So they're telling us that we have all these numbers already in the problem. So the radius is 6 and the height is 25. You would simply introduce those numbers. Remember that that symbol there that looks like a table is called pi, and it's 3.14. That's its value. So if you plug in those numbers like that, that would be your volume, which is answer C. All right, so the next question, question 45, looks at combined figures. So sometimes in the GED, you'll get a figure like this, and they'll ask you to find the area or the perimeter. So what you have to realize is that here they're showing you two figures. They're showing you half a circle, and they're showing you a rectangle. And you have to, in order to solve it, solve the area of these two structures on their own. Okay, so first of all, what's the area of half a circle? So you would take the area of a circle, which is pi multiplied by radius squared. Because we're talking about half a circle, you divide that by 2. And then you just put these numbers in, and you end up with 14.13. This is for the circle. And then you would do the same thing for your rectangle. Okay, in the case of the rectangle, the area is length times width. So you just go ahead and plug those numbers in. Gives you 96. And then to find the combined area of both both things, to find the answer, you would basically add up these two areas that you found already. Okay, so that's answer A. Okay, question 46. So this is a question that is, Tim's wall is 20 feet high. The ladder, I made a mistake there, is leaning against the wall. The feet of the ladder are 5 feet from the base of the wall. How long is the stair? How long is the ladder? Okay, so here what they're, sorry I didn't word this problem very well. So here what they're asking you to think about is this thing called the Pythagorean Theorem, okay, which says that when you have a right triangle like this, this is the formula that you have to use. So if we apply it to the problem, this is what they're telling us. They're asking us how long that ladder is. So that's the x there. They're telling us that the ladder is 5 feet from the base of the wall, and they're telling us that the wall is 20 feet high. Okay, so all you have to do now is plug those numbers into your equation like this. That gives you that. Okay, and now you have the issue of how do you get rid of that c raised to the second power. So remember that in order to do this, what you have to do is you have to take the square root, okay, on the left and the right. And that would give you that c is equal to 20.61. Option B. Okay, question 47. It says a miniature toy casino shaped like a pyramid is being gifted to tourists in Las Vegas. The height of the pyramid is 15 centimeters, the width is 6, and the length is 6. What is the volume of the toy? Okay, so once again, you would look at the formula for a pyramid, and it says that the volume is 1/3 of the base times the height. And all you have to remember here is that the base is actually the width times the length, okay? So they're giving us these numbers in the problem, and all you have to do is plug them into your equation like this. That would end up with this number and a volume of 180. All right, question 48. It says, Joe is making party hats for a birthday party. Each hat is the shape of a cone and has the circumference of 12 pi and a slant height of 5 centimeters. He will make 10 hats. What is the total surface area in square centimeters of all 10 hats combined? All right, so here what you would do is, first of all, you would use this, equation to find the surface area of a cone, okay? So it's made up of two parts. The first part looks at the side of the cone, and then the second part of the equation looks at the area of the base. We are not going, we're making birthday hats, so we're not going to calculate the area of the base because we're not going to use that, right? We're only going to use the side of the cone to make the hat. So we can, get rid of that side of the equation. So all we have to do is work with this part of the equation. And they're telling us in the question that the diameter is 12 centimeters, but we need the radius in the question to use this formula. So remember that the radius is half of the diameter. Okay, so with that knowledge, you just plug in the numbers that you have, and that would give you 330 times pi. But you're not done yet, because in the question they're telling us that he's making 10 hats. So you would multiply that number by 10. That gives you 300 multiplied by pi. All right, Claire can drive 400 miles on 18 gallons of gasoline. How many miles can she drive on 30 gallons? All right, so it's always good if you have time to do, first of all, get like a ballpark answer. Okay, so 16 gallons, 30 gallons is almost twice. It's a little bit less than twice the amount for 16 gallons, right? So if we know that 16 gallons gets us 400 miles, then twice that amount should be about 800, okay? So if we look back at our questions, then our answer should be around these two questions. Sorry, it would include B as well. All right, so what you have to do here is set up a proportion. So like this, as we said before, and multiply across. So here the proportion or the relation between the values is this. We said that 16 gallons is equal to 400 miles. All right, so we have gallons to miles. So we would set up our equation like this, where we have to find the miles there on the right side. So if you multiply across, as we said before, you end up with that number. Divide both sides by 16 to get your x, which is equal to 750, option C. All right, and the final question looks at pay. So it says Lori is paid $7 an hour. If she earns 340 in a week, how many hours did she work? Pretty straightforward. All you would do is divide that pay that she gets by 7, and that gives you $48.85. Excuse me, 48 hours and 85. But notice if we look at the answers that the answers are giving in a percentage form. So it's either going to be one of these two. It's probably going to be the first one, right? Because the number is 48 times 80.85. But let's change that improper fraction to a whole mixed number. All right. So we know that the number is going to be 48, the whole number. So now we have to find the remainder. So once again, you would first of all find out how many 7s are in 342, and that's 48, right? So if you multiply 48 times 7, that gives you 336. If you then subtract that number from the denominator, that's going to give you 6, and that's going to be your remainder. Okay, and the denominator of your remainder is going to be 7. So you end up with 48 and 6/7, okay, which is answer A. Okay, folks, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. If you considered this helpful, please consider subscribing, sharing with your colleagues and friends. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.